Hello, everybody. Welcome to another virtual gallery reception, this time from Mark Thode from Pipestone, Minnesota. We are so blessed to have his artwork in our gallery right now. And now the date today is April 4th. His artwork will be in our gallery until April 26th. April 26th is a Friday. We close our doors at 4 o'clock. So if you can get to us anytime Monday through Friday to the Smock Gallery in Marshall at 509 West Main, take a visit and see it in person. But tonight we have Mark with us. We have some guests. We have some Smock staff. We are going to be exploring his exhibit through a video, and then asking Mark some questions, and we will be editing this gathering together and putting it on our website later. So if you want to check back and watch this later, rewatch it, or watch it for the first time later, please do. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I am going to first read, oh, by the way, hi, I'm Nicole DeBoer. I'm the executive director at Smock. But it's not about me, it's about Mark Thode. So I'm going to read you Mark's bio and a little bit about him and his company called Skycloth Creative. And so here we go. I'm going to look down to read. Mark received an artist growth grant from Smock in 2023 to assemble a portfolio of work that he created for community theaters and performing arts centers for the past 15 years. For this, Mark also created a new website, Skycloth Creative, that displays his work with the intention that it can be used as a visual tool to connect with future projects. Mark Thode is a print and identity designer with an introverted disposition and a love of the theater. Long before getting his degree in graphic design from Bemidji State University, he began his career in theater, working behind the scenes in community productions. Fast forward to the present, he has worked for a newspaper, owned a portrait photography studio for 12 years, has collaborated as a freelance graphic artist on many projects, and has been the director of a performing arts venue for many years. In his spare time, he loves learning and experiencing with theatrical light design, serves on the board of 2 different nonprofit arts organizations, and loves spending time with his 2 Cocker Spaniels, Kirby and Bailey. He is fluent in lorem ipsum. The artist statement for this particular exhibit is as follows, and this is from Mark, so I'm reading in first person. From a very young age, I knew I wanted to be an artist, encouraged especially by my grandmother. I just didn't know how to make a living at being a visual studio artist. So I decided the convergence of technology and visual art was the path for me, graphic design. A unique color palette, creative layouts, a quirky glyph, and rad typography have now become my daily spiritual practice. I initially became a graphic designer because I wanted to create movie posters. While in high school, being part of the design team that created a poster concept for the next Steven Spielberg or James Cameron movie was so inspiring to me. It motivated me to study the graphic arts. I have spent a lot of time standing alone outside of a movie theater, gazing at my design of many movie posters. The structure of all 3 thematic images that make up the composition juxtaposed to the hierarchy of the billing typography intrigues me. I have yet to create a poster for James Cameron, but I have harbored this interest in creating posters and marketing materials for community theater. Like a good movie trailer, the poster aims to pique audience interest without answering all the questions. Fall short and a poster doesn't get noticed. Go too far and a poster doesn't leave any room for curiosity. The end goal, after all, is to drive an audience into the theater. And what better way to do that than to make people think and be intrigued by the visual representation of a piece? Creating key art, the visual representation of a musical or a play used in marketing, is the crucial step in the process of promoting a show. I have been creating posters for community theater for now over 15 years, mostly for the community theater and performing arts venue in Pipestone, Minnesota. I have learned that my job as a graphic designer is to interpret what the playwright is saying in a two-dimensional image, what the director wants to project to the audience, and how the producers want the show to be perceived. I have learned that you have seconds to grab someone's attention. While as an artist, I may want to embellish and imagineer, but as someone who has experience in advertising, I observe that simplicity can drive the message home more effectively. This body of work is a sampling of what I have created for various community theater events, and also some titles that are on my wish list. This collection of posters is my portfolio of creating identities for stories and projects of the stage as a skycloth creative. So great. Thank you, Mark. So with that, Mark is going to introduce himself, but first we are going to take a look at his exhibit. And thanks to SMOC staff member, Crystal Lawaji. She has taken video of all of the posters, the graphic design and photography work that Mark has done and created and used as his theater posters. And that's what the exhibit consists of. It is beautiful. It is vibrant and really inspiring and makes you want to go to all those shows, even though they're past. So Crystal has created a video of the gallery so you can experience it as if you were there in person. And we're going to watch that video now. And then we're going to come back, have Mark introduce himself and open up for questions. Just amazing. So much heart and work has gone into your art. I am just so impressed. I know a bit of it after working for 20 years as a corporate creative director and having a stable of graphic designers, and then working with professional photographers. I know how much work it is. And so your talent is just exemplary. It really is, Mark. It is the top of the top. Yes. So Mark, if you want to say a few words, maybe something I missed, we'd love to hear from you a bit.
Okay. My name is Mark Thode, and I first off want to thank the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council for being the source of funding for the McKnight Foundation so that we could make the project possible, putting this portfolio together, but then also for the opportunity to showcase that work in a gallery space. And this is my second time being in the gallery, and I'm very thankful for our Regional Arts Council and you as the staff. I was born and raised in Pipestone, and went through the local school district here, graduated in 2007 from high school. And then I left Pipestone for a few years and attended college in Bemidji, and attended Bemidji State University. And there I received my undergraduate degree in the graphic arts. And while I was going to school, I worked four part-time jobs for many different organizations and different offices on campus. I worked for a web design office, the main communications office at the university. I worked for the local newspaper. Just so many different things. And my ambition was, while being a full-time student, was to work on as many projects as I can, so that when I got to my senior year, I had a large body of work to pull from to put a portfolio together. Because when we graduated, or before we graduated, through the design curriculum, we had to present our portfolio in front of a panel of about 8 or 9 designers, professional designers that have come from across the country. So it was very much like American Idol as a graphic designer, trying to convey or to persuade this panel of professionals of, this is my portfolio and I deserve to graduate and go out into the real world and work in the workforce. And I graduated in 2011, received my undergraduate degree, and then came back to Pipestone. When I was going to college, during the summer, I worked for a newspaper, our local newspaper, and took a job as a full-time graphic designer when I came back to Pipestone after graduating college. And I did that for a number of years. And on the side of working as a graphic designer for the newspaper, I also had a photography business. And I had a photography studio in downtown Pipestone here, and I partnered with a very established photographer. She opened up her space so that we could share it. I was a very new photographer, and very thankful that an established, very well-known photographer in our area opened up her space so that I could come in and learn and open my business up in her space. So it was really a great opportunity. And since then, I've closed my photography studio now, but I've continued to do graphic design as a freelancer. And now I'm the managing director of the Pipestone Performing Arts Center in Pipestone. I started working with the Pipestone Performing Arts Center back when I was in like 6th or 7th grade. And I started as a follow spotlight operator. And I worked with our regional choir group here, the Auckland Singers, and it snowballed and cultivated into me working behind the scenes with the local community theater group, the Calumet Players, as well as the venue at large here, which is the Performing Arts Center, the Pipestone Performing Arts Center. And so I've done everything that you can in the theater, from scrubbing the toilets to mopping the floor. I've produced and directed, I've stage managed. I've been on the running crew of many musicals and plays, but now I'm serving as the managing director, and I serve on the board of directors as well. And so my experience with theater goes all of the way back to when I was a kid. I practically grew up backstage, and so my love of the theater is now infused in my graphic design work. And I'm very thankful for the organizations here that have allowed me to work for them and with them to provide them visual identities for their projects.
Awesome. We're going to open it up for questions. I can, let's see. I have a lot of things going around in my head for questions. This is more of a statement, and I would love for your reaction. I know that artists are not based on the equipment that they use. There's a lot of misconception of, well, if you have a nice camera, you automatically are a photographer. Or if you have access to high-end graphic design tools, Adobe Suite, you automatically can be a graphic designer. So what has your experience and teachings led you to believe in that? How maybe you can just talk about your photography career and how you, what kind of a path you had to go on that, and then where it's taken you with your theater photography that blesses many of your posters.
Yes, I cannot tell you the amount of times when I had my photography studio, I did weddings. It was very ambitious. Weddings are they're very hard to do, and they're very taxing. And I know during a lot of these weddings, people would see these big cameras that I was carrying around, and they would say, "Oh, I wish I had such a nice camera, because then I could take some nice pictures." And I would respond with, "Well, chefs, professional chefs, they have access to amazing cookware, but the cookware doesn't create the food, right? It's the chef. The camera is, and the graphic design software and the computer software, they're tools, just like a paintbrush for a visual studio painter. It's nothing more than a tool." Photography, I've had such a big interest in photography since I was a little kid. I think I had my very first point and shoot little digital camera, and this is when film and digital, or when the industry was changing from film to digital, and the digital was taking over. I had one of the very first point and shoot cameras that you could get, and I was so impressed and so amazed that you could take a photograph and then immediately be presented with this image that you took at the back of a camera. It was very exciting. And then later started working with a very cheap version of Photoshop, and I taught myself all of the different things that you can do within that software. I never really set out to be a professional photographer. It kind of happened. My ambition was always with the theater, and when I was in high school, I had to think of a real job to go out and pursue, and I thought maybe the graphic arts would work. And like I said, designing movie posters, it was a big inspiration for me. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to go do. I didn't even think of photography. And yeah, photography has been something that I've been interested in, such as from a young age, but like I said, it wasn't something that I went out to pursue. I happened to be good at it, and people, they would purchase my work, and then it gradually grew and snowballed into me having a portrait studio. And it did get to a point when I had my business where it got to be so big, and the photography became a distraction to what I really wanted to be doing, which was graphic design and working in the theater. So I ended up having to close my studio because it got to be too big for me to handle as one person. But the experience that I've cultivated while being a photographer, I have brought into my graphic design work. And one of my, I think a project, if I'm able to merge both mediums, photography and graphic design, that's an all-time high for me.
And you can see that in your work. I mean, some of my favorite pieces are Little Mermaid with all of the different imagery that you've combined in there, and Disney Descendants, you know, the marketing beyond just the one poster. You have this photography, this whole group of photography that you can use in marketing and use it in so many different ways. It's just, you are blessed. You have so many talents. I'm gonna sit back and listen to another question.
I'm curious about how you decide sometimes for the posters, if you're gonna use the actual, because I think the last 5 years, those are the actual actors that were in your show, right? Or is that wrong? Okay.
That's right.
So like, how do you decide when you're gonna use an actual photo of the actors versus like just the graphics, and how does that all happen?
Oftentimes, it will happen both ways. Advertising has to start many, many months in advance of a show. And so often we're having to promote a full season of lineup, a full season lineup versus just one event. So I have to, and it usually happens in the late summer. It's just how our seasons land here in Pipestone with our fiscal years here with the different organizations that we have. But at the end of the summer, I have all of the show titles that we're going to be doing. And then I have to come up with some type of concept for every single one of these events. And many times at that time, I don't have access to who's going to be cast in the show. Maybe we don't know. And so I'm often forced to do something a little bit more graphical or illustrative, or even just using typography. And it's as time approaches, the rehearsals and the auditions and opening night of a production, then I have access to the artists that are actually taking place on stage or carrying out the production on stage. And so it's then that's when I'll capture photographs if I can. And then I'll swap out whatever illustrative form I have on the poster and then put in a real photograph. That happened with, I mean, for example, I think I have Willy Wonka, the poster up there in the gallery. And the actress that played Wonka, we didn't know that she was going to be playing the role until May. And the musicals happen in June. So we had about a month in advance. But there was a piece of stock photography that I had invested in that was in place of her picture up until she was cast.
Mm-hmm. As far as like you choosing the graphics that you choose, how do you choose them? Like, how do you find them? How often are they stock photos, or do you make some? Because I know you're an artist yourself too, right? Is there? Yeah. So I guess what's the process of putting it all together?
Yeah. In terms of process, it normally starts with a conversation with the director of a production. And then from there, that director may or may not offer some insight on what they want to see the poster to look like. They might have ideas of their own, or they may not. So it usually starts with a meeting with the director or a producer of a show. And then if I can, if it's a play, a straight play or a musical, I will try to get my hands on a copy of the script myself so that I can read the script and interpret what I think should be there visually to promote and advertise the show. And then after I've read the script and after I've tried to ideate or conceptualize what I think visually is going to best promote an event, I will start doing some concepts just as a thumbnail in a sketchbook. And then once I've got my ideas down on paper, then I'll spend some time, if it's something illustrative, or if it's a piece of stock photography that I have to find, I'll start that process. And there's various websites that I'll pay copyright or royalties to use those graphics as part of my work.
Mhm.
I often say I'm a graphic designer and I'm not an illustrator. So I wish I could hand illustrate many of these things and then turn them into computerized vector formats, but I'm not an illustrator. So I often have to take graphics that are either stock or have already been built, and then I make sure that they're in a vector format so that I can really take away and piece together various elements. And oftentimes I will really tear apart a piece of stock art, and then I'll use what I can and what I want to use. And it's the same thing with photography.
Mhm.
And it's an interesting, once the artwork has been established, the typography is really, it can be complex because there are rules for a musical or a straight play that you get from the royalties house. For example, the writer or the lyricist or the composer of a show, their name has to be a certain percentage of the title.
Mhm.
And working with community groups, the leaders that are within this community, within the community groups, like the directors and the producers and the music directors, the choreographers, because we're at the community level, they often want to see their name on the poster as well. And so you have to find this hierarchy and balance with the title of the show, and then the original lyricist and the composers and the writers, and then of course the community names as well have to be added, and then trying to figure out size wise how that's going to work and lay out on a poster. It can be complex and confusing at times.
Sounds very overwhelming, yeah.
What do you use for your sort of inspiration for your color palettes? Is it something that sort of sparks something as you're reading the script that gives you kind of a mood, or?
Yes, often when I'm meeting with the director for the first time, or if like I said, if I have if I can get my hands on a script, I often will immediately visualize tonally colors what should be placed in the advertising, and then I try and stick to a palette that doesn't go over 4 or 5 swatches or colors, and I try to stick to that so that I can then carry that out to everything that I do. You know, there's so many pieces that go into a marketing package. It's the poster and the program or the playbill. There's newspaper display ads, there's magazine ads that we place. I mean, we've even done billboards. There's digital signage here at the Art Center that we have to take care of, and then social media. So I try and make sure that that color palette is simple enough that it's going to translate to all of those different assets, print and digital.
All right, let's get into fonts. Do you have a personal philosophy about how many fonts? What's your limit? Like usually I know graphic designers are like 3. Don't use more than 3 fonts on one piece of work. What's your philosophy?
Well, graphic designers don't call them fonts, we call them typefaces. When I was going to school through the college curriculum in Bemidji, there was such a big industrial rule that you couldn't use 3 or 4 more fonts in one particular piece. But I've seen graphic artists that have done some really cool work using it really runs the gamut. So I guess it really depends on what the project is. A project like a poster for a community theater production, I try and, when I'm approaching the treatment of the title, I tend to be a little bit more creative. But when it comes to the really important information, like the dates, the place of the event, the ticket prices, and all of that, I really try and stick to about two fonts if I can, and try and create that typographical hierarchy within that same font family if I can. To not, because I don't want to overwhelm the visual identity. And I'm often caught in this hurricane of trying to, I want to create pieces of art for a poster, but I also have a strong advertising background. And so I know all of this information, this text has to be on the poster, but there's often times where I would love to just see an image with a title, you know, but often I have to clutter my designs and fool it with a whole bunch of information in order to sell tickets.
I hear that, feel that deeply in a lot of marketing initiatives, whether it's for theater or for any arts event, that they feel so cluttered, and we at SMOC have to do the same thing. You know, if we're marketing something, we have to have all the information on there. Then it's just like, oh hell, maybe we should just have a white background and text. There's so much information we have to have on here. Crystal or Carolyn, anything else you wanted to check in with Mark about?
I'm actually curious about the artwork you have behind you. Can you say a little bit about some of that?
The piece that's directly behind me here, I don't know, neither one of the pieces behind me have a name on them, so I don't know who the artist is. But the piece that's behind me here, I purchased at a local antique shop, and you might recognize the gentleman's name. His name is Loane Carlson. He had an antique shop here, and I know he's well known in Marshall. I think he recently just passed away. This piece of work was in one of his shops, so I don't know if he had created this piece of artwork or not. I don't know. And the piece that's behind me here, the blue color palette piece, it was downstairs in the Performing Arts Center, tucked away in a corner, and it doesn't have a name on it. And I loved it so much, I wanted to have it in my office. So I wish I had more insight and answer for you, Crystal, but I don't.
That's okay. Hearing the stories is interesting. I like the one a lot, the blue kind of one behind you too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know one of my favorite pieces that's in the SMOC gallery is These Shining Lives. I love that piece. That is really moving, and I mean, drew me in enough without even knowing anything about that show for me to commit time to go and see the show. And it was a great show. So kudos to you, because the marketing that you put in front of me got me to buy tickets. So yes, that's one of my favorite pieces. Do you want to plug anything for Pipestone Performing Arts Center coming up?
Of course I do. The next project that is up and coming here is the community theater group, the Calumet Players. They're putting together a big musical production of The Addams Family, and they'll be doing that this summer. And so I'm excited to see what they have planned for the show. But most importantly, I'm excited to see what kind of marketing stuff we can do with a darker toned piece of musical. And I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. So I'm very excited to see what we can come up with.
I'm pretty sure you might be my brother from another mother. Well, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to cut us short. If Carolyn or Crystal has anything else.
I mean, very, very quick that I agree with you about These Shining Lives. That poster, love it. I kept the program from it and cut it out, and it's actually on the side of my like marker art box over here. So it lived on. I needed to keep it and not, you know, recycle it. And also I'm excited to see what you do with the Addams Family visually too. I am a Halloween fan as well and darker stuff fan, so that's all exciting.
Thank you very much.
What a great testimonial that your work lives on. Yes, people save it. That's how awesome it is. So everybody that's watching this after the fact, Mark's exhibit is in the Smock Gallery at 509 West Main in Marshall, Minnesota until April 26th. But I believe some of your work might be on display at the Pipestone Performing Arts Center in the walls inside the theater, along with photos of lots of past shows. It's a good trip down memory lane if you get to one of their shows and just spend some time inside the theater looking at things. Mark's work is available on, correct me if I'm wrong, skyclothcreative.com.
Correct.
And so check that out there. And thank you again, Mark, for being with us tonight. Thanks for your dedication to your passion. I just think it's so great when artists have so many gifts, but they have one that really shines and they just let go of some other things and let that be their life's work. So kudos to you for being able to make that decision.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So with that, we'll sign off. Thanks, everybody. Good night.